It started like any other quiet morning on my ranch. The sun was just peeking over the rolling hills, birds were singing, and the cows were slowly wandering out of the barn, chewing cud like they owned the place, which honestly they kind of do. Life out here was peaceful, almost meditative, but that peace shattered faster than a window in a hailstorm when I noticed something unusual. A pair of teenage girls snapping selfies right in the middle of my pasture. At first I thought maybe they were lost, but then I saw them, laughing, pointing at my cows, and clearly having the time of their lives. One of them, whom I would soon learn was Keran's daughter, had somehow convinced herself that it was okay to use my property as her personal photo studio, and if that wasn't enough, she was deliberately tossing bits of feed to lure the cows closer for better shots. I tried to stay calm. I shouted from a distance, "Hey, you need to get off my land!" One girl looked up, shrugged, and kept taking selfies, completely ignoring me. My blood started boiling, but before I could march over, I noticed something that made me smirk. She had positioned herself perfectly for a photobomb, and me? I had the perfect weapon, my trusty manure loader. But let me rewind for a second. This wasn't just about selfies or spoiled cows. This ranch had been in my family for generations. We weren't rich, but we had pride. And in this small, tightly knit community, people knew boundaries. So when I realized this wasn't a simple prank, I knew things could escalate fast. And escalate they did. Moments after the girls were done posing, the real chaos started. A call to the HOA. Yes, Keran, her mother, somehow decided that the proper solution to teenage mischief was to involve local authorities. Not only that, but she was furious that the rancher on this property was harassing her daughter. She didn't check addresses. She didn't knock on the door. She called the cops. When the officers arrived, it was chaos. Confusion reigned supreme as they tried to figure out which property Keran was even talking about. My neighbor, a grumpy man named Bill, even chimed in from across the street, muttering something about the HOA being useless. Little did anyone know that one phone call would trigger a domino effect that would eventually topple the entire HOA. I stood there, leaning on my manure loader, trying not to laugh too hard. The irony was almost too perfect. Keran had called the cops on the wrong ranch owner. Meanwhile, my cows grazed peacefully, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. If you think this is just a small mix-up, buckle up. Because what happened next turned this sleepy neighborhood upside down. The HOA's carefully constructed world about to crumble in ways no one could have predicted. By the time the police arrived, tension had already thickened like fog over the pasture. Two officers, polite but clearly unsure, pulled up in their cruiser. They stepped out, badges gleaming, looking from me to the girls, then back to me. "We got a call about trespassing," one said, notebook in hand. I nodded slowly, gesturing toward the pasture. "You mean these two?" I asked, pointing at the teens, who were still laughing and scrolling through selfies. Keran's daughter, the instigator of all this chaos, didn't even look embarrassed. Instead, she pointed at me dramatically. "He's threatening us!" she squealed, voice high-pitched and panicked. My jaw dropped. Threatening? Really? At this point, my neighbor Bill had wandered over, scratching his head. "She's on the wrong ranch, cops," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The officers glanced at their notes, confused. They had the address from Keran's call, but clearly they were in the wrong place. I tried to explain calmly. "This is my property. They walked in here without permission. That's trespassing." One officer nodded slowly, but before things could settle, the girls started giggling again. That's when I spotted my chance. See, I had been waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim my peace, and also to send a gentle reminder about boundaries. I walked over to my manure loader, carefully keeping my movements slow, almost cinematic. The girls had no idea what was coming. I didn't have to say a word. The loader rumbled to life, lifting a bucket full of fresh compost, perfectly timed as I drove it past the edge of the frame of their selfies. The camera flash from the phone caught the manure loader mid-motion. The result? A photobomb no one would forget. The girls screamed, half in horror, half in laughter, while I just leaned back and let the loader idle. The officers, meanwhile, were dumbfounded. One scratched his head and muttered, "Well, that's one way to deal with trespassers." By now, word of the incident had spread through the neighborhood. Keran herself had arrived, face red with fury, ready to escalate the situation further. She was convinced she had the moral high ground. But reality had other plans. She had called the wrong ranch owner, involved the police unnecessarily, and in the process embarrassed her daughter spectacularly. Meanwhile, the HOA, already stretched thin with minor disputes, was watching all of this unfold. A minor misunderstanding was quickly transforming into a full-blown scandal. Tensions that had simmered under the surface for years were about to boil over, and Keran's misstep was the spark. By the end of the day, the pasture was calm again, cows grazing as if nothing had happened. But the neighborhood? It would never look at the HOA or Keran the same way again. One phone call, one photobomb, and suddenly, the rules everyone relied on were in question. By the following morning, word of the selfie incident had traveled faster than wildfire through our small town. Texts, group chats, and coffee shop whispers buzzed with excitement. Everyone had an opinion about Keran, her daughter, and the so-called trespassing rancher. But no one anticipated what would happen next, the complete and utter collapse of the HOA. It started with a meeting. Normally, HOA gatherings were boring affairs, discussions about lawn maintenance, mailbox designs, or fence heights. But this time, tension filled the room like static electricity. Keran had stormed in, papers in hand, determined to get everyone on her side. She presented her story, how her daughter was harassed by the rancher, how the cows had been threatening, and how she had done the only logical thing by calling the police. At first, the board members nodded politely, pretending to listen, but as the story unfolded, cracks began to show. One board member, a retired lawyer named Marge, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you called the right address?" she asked. Keran bristled, but Marge pressed on. "Because according to property records, your daughter was on the wrong ranch entirely." The room went silent. Keran's face turned crimson. One by one, neighbors started speaking up, sharing stories about similar incidents the HOA had mishandled. Unexplained fines, misplaced complaints, and mysterious letters sent to the wrong homes. Each anecdote piled on top of the last, and slowly the facade of authority the HOA had maintained for years began to crumble. Then came the tipping point. Someone brought up the video footage of the manure loader photobomb. The room erupted in laughter, and Keran's credibility evaporated in real time. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. Her calls to the police, her accusations, even her carefully prepared paperwork, it all looked ridiculous in the context of this clear and hilarious mistake. By the end of the meeting, it was obvious. The HOA had lost control. Decisions were questioned, leadership was doubted, and long-standing grudges surfaced. People realized that the HOA's system, which had relied on fear, vague rules, and miscommunication, was no longer sustainable. The group quietly admitted that many past disputes had been mishandled, often causing more harm than good. Within hours, members were resigning, and the once feared HOA was officially in disarray. Meanwhile, I watched the chaos from my porch, cows grazing peacefully in the background. Keran stormed out, muttering about legal action and next steps, but everyone knew the damage was done. Her reputation was in tatters, the HOA was crumbling, and the neighborhood would never see her the same way again. All of it. One careless call, one misunderstanding, and yes, one perfectly timed manure loader had unleashed a chain reaction that exposed every flaw in the system. The ranch, the cows, and even my sense of justice had played a role in toppling the HOA. The dust settled slowly over our little corner of the world. The HOA was in ruins, Keran had retreated to lick her wounds, and the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip and relief. But life on the ranch went on. as if the chaos had been nothing more than a minor storm. The cows grazed calmly, birds chirped overhead, and I finally felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. After all, justice had been served, albeit in a way that no one could have predicted. In the days that followed, the neighborhood began to adjust to the new reality. Without the HOA enforcing arbitrary rules and spreading fear, residents rediscovered a sense of independence. People started talking to each other again instead of relying on letters and fines. Lawn competitions became friendly. Fences were repaired collaboratively, and old grievances were addressed face-to-face rather than hidden behind bureaucratic red tape. The collapse had sparked a kind of revival, a chaotic but ultimately liberating shakeup. Keran, on the other hand, struggled to regain her footing. Her daughter had become a minor internet sensation in the local community after the infamous selfie. Photobomb went viral in neighborhood group chats. Memes circulated, neighbors teased, and Keran's repeated attempts to explain the incident only made things worse. She had lost credibility in the community, and every attempt to regain it felt like throwing water on a bonfire. It just fanned the flames of ridicule. Interestingly, not all lessons came at her expense. Many neighbors began reflecting on how easily assumptions and knee-jerk reactions could spiral out of control. Keran's mistake became a cautionary tale. The dangers of rushing to authority without checking facts, the importance of respecting property and boundaries, and how a small misunderstanding could escalate into full-blown social drama. For better or worse, the entire neighborhood had learned a lesson in accountability, patience, and humor. As for me, I couldn't resist one final bit of mischief. I hung a small sign near the pasture. Smile for the cows, but stay on the right. Ranch. It became an instant conversation starter and a gentle reminder to everyone about the incident that had. Enjoying this wild ranch story? Hit that subscribe button to catch more unbelievable real-life neighborhood drama. Give this a like if the photobombed selfies made you laugh, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if a stranger walked into your pasture?